This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Because we're going to need it. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing joins us. Dr. Welsing, first a belated happy birthday and welcome back to WOL.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
You know, we had this discussion that we were having with Bob Law, and he was saying that it seems like we're the only group of people who are calling for multiculturalism. We seem like we want others to join in with us. It seems like he was telling some stories to us, and about some of our folks who go out when we go shopping. We like to. We won't buy from ourselves, but we buy from other folks, and we want other folks to know that we're buying their product. What is this? Is this something ingrained? Is this something that's in our psyche, in our DNA? What's going on here?
Well, I would say that is a dimension of what I would refer to as black self-hatred. That if we understand the system that we are in, the system of racism, white supremacy, that is local, national, and global. And if we understand that the people who classify themselves as white are a tiny minority on the planet. If you look at TV, you think that the people who classify themselves as white are the majority, and that the people of color are, unless you're looking at television from Africa. But if you turn on our television here in the United States, we see white, 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 white. But in reality, whites are a tiny minority on the planet, fewer than 1/10. And they are, as I have repeatedly said, genetic recessive in terms of skin coloration. And so their dilemma on the planet, the white dilemma, after the 15th century, when they realized that they were a tiny minority on the planet, their activity has been for their genetic survival. So that means if you are fewer than 1/10 of the people on the planet and you are outnumbered 10-1, and that you are genetic recessive and can be genetically annihilated, you have to, that's a scientific assessment of their problem. They made a scientific, meaning an objective assessment of their problem. And they realized for us to survive as white people, we have to do certain things with the people of color. Now, they're people of different shades of black. They're black, brown, red, and yellow. And so the people whose skins are black, that are really the mother and father people of the planet, they have the greatest genetic power to cause our genetic annihilation. And so if we can brainwash these people to hate themselves, they will end up functioning in our interests. Now the same is true of the brown, red, and yellow. But the black people are critical people because they not only are perceived as having, but actually have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation. And indeed, and in fact, white is a genetic mutation from black. Black people are the parents of white people on the planet. So they had to systematically brainwash black people into self-hatred. And so that behavior ends up being a byproduct of the dynamic and the total system structure of racism and white supremacy. And as long as we don't understand that system, then we will be vulnerable too. And this is what, I think that as Bob Law was saying, and as many other people have said, we're the only people that are uncomfortable just looking at ourselves as black people. We're not comfortable until we can include the white, the poor, the gay, the lesbians, and the Hispanics. So standing alone as black in our minds, in our brainwashed state, that doesn't look right. I remember years ago when I was teaching at Howard University in the Department of Pediatrics, and I said, look, our Department of Pediatrics should become the #1 center in the world in terms of expertise in the health problems faced by black people, and then we can become expert in the health problems of black people in the Caribbean and South America and in Africa. And one of my black colleagues who happened to have been married to a white person, he said, no, Francis, we don't want to do that. That would be second-class medicine. You see, to focus on ourselves as though we were a priority, that would be second-class medicine. And in the same way, each time somebody says, black people's interests and the poor and the Hispanics and, you see, all of the other groups take care of themselves. It doesn't
Hold that thought right there, Doctor. We've got to take a break. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is our guest. We've got a traffic and weather update coming up. Number to call to speak to her, 800-450-7876. That's 800-450-7876. Or you can reach me on Facebook or Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. You can also like us on Facebook as well. Again, the number is 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us and our guest, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Call somebody up and tell a friend Dr. Welsing's on the radio. If they're out of town, they can listen to us at WOLDCnews.com. Before the break, Dr. Welsing, you were telling us that we seem to be the only group that requires some sort of unification. We need inclusion. We're on the illusion of inclusion. We want to be we don't want to be all black or it's too black. I just wonder, where does this come from? Why can't we go alone? Because, people are complaining, well, they don't want to do that because it's too black. You got to have a white person in there, or you got to have Hispanic in there. Other groups don't seem to have that problem, or that issue, if you will. What is it with us?
See, I would say that we, as black people, in the power context of the system of racism, white supremacy, we have the most negative self-image by design within the system itself. In other words, if you can program a people to hate themselves, they, in effect, will destroy themselves. They will sit by as they are being genocided because they have been taught to hate themselves. I've been starting a movement called Most Black, Most Beautiful, because most black, and this is why black people learn within the power context of the system of racism, if you are black, get back. If you are brown, stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow. If you're white, you're right. That is the color code within the system of racism, white supremacy, for white genetic survival. It's completely and totally logical. This is taught to black people by the system of racism, white supremacy, because the more color you have means the greater the genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation. And this is why black people are now being pushed to the back of the bus, and we are told illegal immigrants, but no, people from Central and South America are being brought in. Black people are being moved out of urban centers. Hispanics are being brought in because they appear to be a lesser color threat. A lesser color threat. And when we see in the cases of Trayvon Martin and the other cases where a white person shoots a black person and they say, I was afraid. Well, this is a subconscious fear of white genetic annihilation. In other words, you have genetics that can destroy me, that can make white disappear. And this is what President Barack Obama represents. The genetic power of his father, black man, plus the recessive genetic makeup of his mother. So in the offspring, the white disappears. Well, now, when you translate this globally, this is what is taking place on this planet. And so as long as we don't, as black people, as long as we stop short of having a totally in-depth analysis of what it is that we are dealing with, to that extent we will keep walking around in a circle and saying, why? See, the question why is a question raised by the brain computer, meaning that the person is to seek an answer. If you're self-respecting and your brain computer says why, then the responsibility is to go forward and seek the answer to the question. Not just keep saying why, until we fall into the grave. So we can have the answers. I mean, the answers is available, but that means that puts us on the black side of a chessboard. Black people want to, and I can understand the hundreds of years that we were enslaved. Slavery was a phase of the system of racism, white supremacy. And black people were being beaten. You know, the film 12 Years a Slave and any other films that they choose to make about slavery, so that we focus on slavery and not on what's happening now. But all of that brutalization, rape, mutilization, all of the torture, etc., killing that went on during that period, then black people were given a religion and told the image of the slave master is God. This is the person that will save you. So for those hundreds of years, longer than black people in this area of the world have been emancipated, they were taught to believe that the image of white is what is going to save them. And tragically, this is deeply embedded in our thinking, because we are now, slavery was a phase of white supremacy. We are now in an updated phase of racism, white supremacy, towards the same end. You see, and we have interestingly called our struggle seeking equality with white people. It's white people who are not equal to black people. It's white people who have the genetic inability to produce what is normal for human beings, and that is to have skin color.
Yeah,
So
do they know?
Go ahead, Carl.
I was going to ask the question, do they understand this, or do they do not understand as much as we don't either? So both sides don't understand what's going on.
No, people who classify themselves as white do. I mean, my definition of racism, where I say that the behavior is consciously and or subconsciously determined. Now, I had an opportunity to speak to Tom Metzger, who's one of the white supremacists or white separatists. We were on the same television program some time ago out in California, and he's an outspoken white supremacist, white separatist. And I was sitting next to him, and I asked him, I said, because the program was on a panel on racism, and so during the commercial break, he was seated next to me, and I touched him on his arm, and I said, Mr. Metzger, tell me something. What percentage of people who classify themselves as white are fearful of white genetic annihilation? And he very politely said, he didn't say, don't touch me, so-and-so. He was very polite, and he said, Dr. Welsing, nearly all of them, but they don't want to admit it, or they're afraid or ashamed to admit it. Do you see? So every time the white person, see, just black causes people, if they are taking a skin resistance test, just the image of black sets up a fear response. White doesn't set up a fear response in black people. Black people are not afraid of just looking at white skin. Now, white skin carrying a gun, that's another thing. White skin with a sheet over their heads and a rope, that's another thing. That's experience violence towards us. But black people don't react to white in the same way that whites react to blacks. And this is why a white person can say, I was afraid, and this is what the stand your ground laws are all about. You make me afraid. Well, this is critically important at this particular point in time because the white population is going to become the minority. And so then that sets up the fear, the already resident fear. We can be genetically annihilated. We can disappear. And see, black people and other people of color do not have an awareness of, well, you can genetically disappear. Black people, in the hundreds of years that black people have been oppressed, held in submission, under white supremacy, black people wanting to be accepted in the system tried to get rid of their color. And so black people would have sayings, don't marry anybody darker than yourself, and all kinds of sayings as they, put black get back, brown stick around, yellow mellow, white right. In that hierarchy of what black people consider to be beautiful under their brainwashing and training under racism and white supremacy. So black people try to get rid of their color so they will be accepted by people who classify themselves as white. But white people are afraid of being genetically annihilated. And black people don't really understand that fear, but this is what science is all about, where you observe.
And hold that thought right there, Doc, because we've got to take a break at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to come back. I want to find out if this is what's being played out on the television screen. This is what they trying to get us to believe, of these angry black women, all these reality shows, these sisters fighting each other. 800-450-7876, number to call. Dr. Welsing, take your calls for her in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
For staying with us, I guess, to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And Dr. Welsing, before the break, we were talking about, that's the question I posed to you, and let me just tell you why. Because there's an actress by the name of Laverne Cox. She's a sister. She's in this new movie, Orange is the New Black. And she was saying that she was offered a lot of roles, but all of them came with women fighting. She said she doesn't want to go on TV or any of the screen fighting another black woman. I just want to ask, is this the reinforcement of that image that you were talking about? Because they got sisters, angry black women, that nobody wants, not even black men want to be involved with them? Is this part of what you're discussing?
Yes, Carl. In other words, see, this is, if we understood, if black people allowed themselves to understand racism, white supremacy as a total system structure for white genetic survival, we would be able to put all of these images in their proper context and really be able to understand them. See, there's a gigantic propaganda apparatus that is in play in the exact same way that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis understood how they needed to use newspapers, magazines, and movies. They didn't have television at that time, 1933 to 1945. But they understood we are going to annihilate the people who are non-white in Germany and in the rest of Europe. The Semites of the Jewish religion are not white, so we're going to destroy 11 million of them, kill them. But we have to prepare the minds of the German people to accept the destruction of these people, the destruction right up in their face. So we have to paint negative images of them. So all of these images that we see of black people are negative images, and we don't understand how that is tied to the thinking. Hitler had an expression when he talked about the people that he was going to destroy, the Semites of the Jewish religion. He called them Tiermensch That means subhuman. Life unworthy of life. Now, whereas black people, on the whole, have no comprehension of system of racism. When somebody comes to them and offers them, oh, I can have you on TV. Now, you're going to demean and degrade yourself. They don't say that part. I'm going to pay you thus and so, but under my direction, you are going to be demeaning and degrading yourself so that the white people who are looking at you will say, why would we educate these people? These are subhumans. Why would we spend any money for health care for these people? This is ridiculous. This is life unworthy of life. Who would employ these people? Who would educate these people? They're not people. They're subhuman. Now, this is what is happening to us. We are in the same position, I maintain, that the Jews were in before their destruction. Black people are being moved out of the urban centers. The white people who are coming in don't want to live next to them. That's been on the front pages of the Washington Post. But we don't see it because, see, if you don't start, it's just like a doctor who doesn't start with trying to make an accurate diagnosis of the person who comes in the office complaining of a complaint. If the doctor doesn't bother to make what's really going on with this person so I can treat them and hopefully save them. If I don't care as a doctor, I just say, oh, pay me this and take this prescription and get on out of here. So we are in all of these horrible, despicable images. And then black people want to get mad when somebody in the House of Representatives says black men are lazy and they're no good and they're this and they're that. And they could say in black women, I think they're just trashy, crude. Well, don't worry, we're going to destroy them anyway.
Wow.
So we need to, you see, we keep walking in a circle. Protests are fine, but without having an analysis of what the overall problem is. We can tie in the whole dynamic of wanting black men to put on dresses. Meaning the annihilation of their masculinity. So when you annihilate the masculinity of men, you have caused the genocide of a people. But we don't want to look at the big picture. Nobody wants to talk about, well, what is the white responsibility for what is taking place? See, our message to people who classify themselves as white, if you say you're not racist or white supremacist, why aren't you stopping the people who classify themselves as white who are? The system is evident.
800-450-7876. Speak to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Let's go to line one. Brigitte is in D.C. Brigitte, you're on with Dr. Welsing.
Hi, good afternoon, Carl and Dr. Is it Cress Welsing?
It's just Dr. Welsing is fine.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Welsing. Thank you. Dr. Welsing, I wanted to ask you a question. One of the things that I think keeps, giving me some confusing me is going back to where you were saying you were on the panel with, I think you said Mr. Metzger, who is, I guess, Tom Metzger?
Metzger.
Yes, Tom Metzger. And you were asking him that of the white what percentage of the white people who classify themselves as white are fearful of this genetic annihilation, I guess either consciously or subconsciously. Can you help me then understand, and he said that the majority, but they don't want to admit it. So I'm going to say, can you help me understand then how is it that we have such a significant number of white women who obviously classify themselves as white, they're not fearful of being in interracial marriages. I mean, all across TV, we see the Kim Kardashians and the Heidi Klums and, the Nicole Brown when she was living, who actually, I guess, either rebel or defy this rationale or principle and marry outside of their race. And obviously, they're just representative of what's happening on lower economic levels.
Well, no, I would.
And Doc, can you throw in the lady in Scandal on that TV show as well with the answer? Brigitte, thanks for your call.
Well, you see, I'm going to go back to Germany. At the very point that there was the highest incidence of Jewish men marrying German women. See, in other words, the Jewish people were in ghettos and they were emancipated in the middle of the 19th century. And so they were allowed to start going through schools and to having jobs and doing this and doing that. And the men started marrying German women. And at that point, that's when Hitler came to power. See, what we don't look at, and I say that it really is kind of a shell game where, okay, you go through a period where you lynch and castrate black men if they look at a white woman. And so you train the black man. This is the most important thing that you want. This is going to represent that you are now a full human being to have a white woman. Okay, and so at a certain point, you let a certain number of white women make themselves available to black men. And then you kill them because they are sort of taken completely off guard about what the system is really all about. So they have, in a sense, been deceived. I mean, one doesn't even have to talk about. You marry the ones with most money, then you divorce them, and then you bring the money home to white. Or it doesn't talk about how you produce a mixed race group of people whose mothers are white. And the mothers will tell them, even though you have dark skin, you're not white. And so these will be people that you can use against black people because they are ambivalent, having evolved or having been developed in a system of racism. So I say that it's just a trick game because simultaneously that you see large numbers, supposed large numbers of white women with black men, you see black men being incarcerated at unprecedented rates, so that you see the men being removed from the black community and laws being put on the books so that they can be killed at will.
All right, hold that thought right there because we're ready to take another break. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is our guest. 800-450-7876 is the number to call to speak to Dr. Welsing. We'll take your phone calls, folks.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us and our guest, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. The number to call to speak to her, 800-450-7876. And Dr. Welsing, I'm going to let you finish up what you were saying before the break, before we take another call.
So tell me where we were, Carl. What was I commenting about?
I zoned out as well. So I'll tell you what, let's take another call. 800-450-7876 is line 3. Eric's in Brooklyn. Eric, you're on with Dr. Welsing.
I wanted to ask Dr. Welsing, now what I see on television is the use of comedy and stand-up comedians to kind of tell derogatory jokes about black people, about the black community, if you will. And I wanted to ask, what effect, as a psychiatrist, would you say that comedy has on the mind? Again, like you see a lot of silliness and a lot of disrespect, especially to like black historical figures. You get comments like, black people are more racist than white people and things like that. Just wanted to ask you, what you think about black comedy in the present time.
Well, let me say this. I'll start with a statement made by Neely Fuller, who wrote the textbook for victims of racism. If you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and exactly how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. In other words, if you don't understand the context in which the comedy is concerned, occurring, it would be like the comedian might think, okay, well, they're white comics saying certain things, and so I'm just a black comic that is saying certain things. But the black comic and the white comic are not in the same situation. The white comic is in a system of racism, white supremacy that supports whites. The black comedian is in the same context, but the white supremacy context demeans black. And so to the extent that the black person is demeaning him or herself in that system, it reinforces the negativity of the situation that black people are in. And to understand context, imagine you see a picture of a man and he's standing on a board, and he has on a heavy coat and heavy shoes and a heavy hat and everything. And so if you say, well, that's just a man standing on a board. But then once you understand the board is a diving board and he's dressed that way, getting ready to jump off of the diving board, on the one hand, he looks like he's just somebody sane. But if you realize he's on a diving board getting ready to jump into the water, then he looks insane. And I say, to the extent that we do not understand racism, we don't know how to weigh what certain things mean or the impact that it is having. And we need to become aware, because we are in a very critical situation. Let me just comment in this way, that when we see black football players, for example, or rap persons using the N-word, I would really like to say the word so that there's absolute clarity, and justify saying that. And I would say that these are people, our rap artists and the ball players, they're some of the wealthiest black people. They have more money than any of the other black professions or careers. And I say that the reason that the N-word seems to be comfortable, and I say this is at a subconscious level, because even though they have multiple millions of dollars, they still feel like an N.
Yeah,
They know that they were going to be emancipated, not understanding that they are in the system context. When a white person makes multiple millions, they move around and they have, they can really feel like they're a multimillionaire. But the black person can have even more money and then be treated like Oprah Winfrey. We won't even open the door to let you come in. You see, and if you're not shooting a basketball or on the football field, we don't really want to be bothered with you.
Yeah, I've noticed that regarding the N-word, like over the last, say, 15 or 20 years, especially with the popularity of Quentin Tarantino films, where he uses that word a lot. It seems to be used a lot more in public, especially here in this city and New York, amongst people that are not black. And I noticed that a lot of the black kids allow the non-blacks to use that word in front of them and things like that.
See, I say that film, the Tarantino film, and all the times that the N-word was used, that's for white people's reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
See, as long we are not the same. Now, in other words, I talk about racism, white supremacy, so the unjust system of racism, white supremacy can be replaced with a system of justice. Justice meaning no one is mistreated, no one is allowed to be mistreated, and those who need the most help get the most help. That's why I talk about racism. I don't talk about racism to engage in hating white people or be rude or disrespectful. But it's like a chess game. You have to understand the game that is being played. And if you're sitting on the black side of the chessboard, you have to understand the offense, defense that's being played on the white side of the chessboard, because white always moves first. So we have to understand so we can properly weigh and measure. And these images, and this is why Semites of the Jewish religion are so on top of any words that are used to demean them, any images that are used to demean them. Their Anti-Defamation League is on that like white on rice. We need to have a black image defamation league. But we don't understand that we are in a system of racism that is using all of these deplorable, demeaning, degraded images of black people as a basis to genocide black people. See, when you are fearful of genetic annihilation, then the answer to that is genocide. Hitler said the Semites of the Jewish religion were not white, and that they could contaminate the white gene pool along with the gypsies, along with the mixed race people that were in Germany and Europe, left over from the First World War, and they're going to be killed. So Hitler's concern was fear of genetic annihilation, just like all of the outspoken white groups, like the Nazis and the Klan. Their whole thing, they are just openly talking about not wanting to be genetically annihilated in effect. You see, but what's the position of the other people who classify themselves as white? They're not fighting against this en masse. Even all the white people who are in bed with black people are not fighting white supremacy. So what does that tell us? See, and this is what, respectfully, this is what black people need to understand. White people are trying to survive themselves. They have worked out a system for their survival. Tragically, it means genetically annihilating or genociding black people. But if black people would allow themselves to take their self-respect to the level, and that, see, I give credit to Eric Holder. He said the most profound thing that has been said in the 20th, 21st century. Are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? Embedded in the word America is the phrase, I am race. There's no such thing as talking about America without talking about race. Race is only important in a system of racism. The so-called red people have already been genocided. And we are looking, every day, looking at talking about what is happening to black men. If you destroy the men of a people, you have genocided those people. And that's partly what Scandal is all about. Don't worry, black women. Don't worry.
Hold that thought right there, Dr. Welsing. Then we'll let you finish up on Scandal when you get back. Eric, thanks for your phone call. 800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. Welsing. We'll take your calls in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by BKRPodcast.com.
Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
On Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
Thank you for joining us, folks. If you're just getting off work in the district, our guest is Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Some of the people who are going to be stopping by here in the next few days, Hidden Color stablemate, Brother Umar Johnson is going to be here. Also, Professor Griff, Dr. Ron Daniels, and Dr. Kwibenya Ashanti. Dr. Ashanti is the man who wrote what we always talk about, we always love to quote. And, of course, that's the letter, the Willie Lynch letter, and it's a fake. He made it up. But before we take any more calls, I want Dr. Welsing was going to explain to us the obsession, especially with our sisters, about the movie Scandal. Dr. Welsing?
It's a fascinating phenomenon. One day maybe it'll be the subject for people to write graduate theses on. But within the context of the system of racism, white supremacy, a system which is war against black people in general and black men in particular. So the black men are disappearing from the black community. They're either being killed, they're being effeminized, or they're incarcerated. And so the message to black women, don't get upset. Don't engage in counter-racism because of this destructive process. Fantasize that you can be the concubine of the president. You can be an updated Sally Hemings and think that you have arrived at something. See, in other words, you've got to be able to see the big picture. And it's like making a puzzle. You got to know the outline of the puzzle before you can really see clearly where the little small pieces that make up the middle, what picture is really being painted. If you don't know the outline and you don't know the context of the picture, you're going to be in a state of confusion. And we are in a state of confusion about racism, white supremacy. And if somebody could also look at that film, and the minute you see, the whole scene is the White House, and then you have a black lady relating to the president, but interestingly, there is a black lady in the White House right now. And so when some people are looking at it, and they see, okay, this woman is a concubine to the white president. And so then that's almost like a demeaning look at Michelle Obama. She's the black lady in the White House that they don't want to give any respect to, just like they don't want to give respect to her husband. See, we need to wake up. This is 2014. We need to wake up because we are in a state of being primitive and pitiful, not wanting to understand what we are dealing with. And it's okay to complain about death after death after death and have a march death after death after death. But we need to understand simultaneously we are looking at black men being killed, stand your ground. We are looking at public schools being closed. We're looking at black people being forced out of the urban centers. We're being looked at school closings and children not learning. We're looking at high levels of unemployment. And so we need to see, what does this picture paint? What is the picture that is being painted by this? A people who no longer have usefulness. And so when the people talk about rebuilding Detroit, they talk about bringing in educated foreigners to participate in the rebuilding of Detroit. The rebuilding of all of the urban centers that black people are being moved out of. See, somebody talks about connecting the dots, but see, it takes self-respect to connect the dots and try to look at and figure out, well, what is happening to me and what is happening to the people who look like me? And if I don't respect myself, I won't even be interested. If I don't respect myself, I won't care that the fact that they have put HIV/AIDS out here. And that is increasing most amongst black women. I won't look at that because I don't respect myself and I don't care what I do with my genitals. So all of this, I want to say crazy music, that people are being paid millions to produce psychological warfare against black people with all of this trashy language, trashing sex. See, if you trash sex, sex is the act that produces us. But if you have been taken to the point of demeaning and degrading yourself you will degrade sex. And so look at the pornography industry, and look at how black people are being portrayed in this multi-billion-dollar industry. Yeah, they're being paid, but look at what they're doing. They're justifying the genocide of black people. So we need to wake up and start having seminars on what does black self-respect mean? What does black dignity mean? What does black pride mean? See, the transformation that took place in Alabama and the bus boycott, and if you look at those black people, the men and the women, how they were dressed, how they carried themselves, they changed because they had levels of self-respect and courage that allowed them to go up against police dogs, billy clubs, horses, and water hoses. And that's what changed a phase of the racial dynamic in America. And I say the system realized, wow, look at the power that these people represent. We haven't seen anything like this in the history of America. So their black self-respect is dangerous. We have to annihilate black self-respect. We can do it with the so-called entertainment industry. We can start portraying them as superflies and drug dealers, and men disrespecting women and women disrespecting themselves and fighting and killing each other, cursing at each other, demeaning and degrading themselves. We'll pay them a lot, but they don't understand what the deal is. So we will pay them, and they will participate in their own annihilation. Now, if we can't look at the big picture of racism, we won't believe what was happening. The Semites of the Jewish religion didn't believe. They thought they were in. They thought they were Germans. They thought they were being accepted. They had an Einstein and a Rubinstein and a Freud. Oh, no. Oh, we've participated in this country, and we've been in the military, and they wouldn't harm us. At the same time, Hitler was having conferences on how he was going to kill 11 million contaminants.
All right, 800-450-7876, line 1. Brother Don, you have a question for Dr. Welsing?
Hello, Brother Carl and Dr. Welsing. It's a pleasure to hear you speak live, and I'm just so glad that you sending the message out, because a lot of us don't realize the system's not broke. The system is working like it's supposed to. And when you tell people that, they say, nah, I don't believe that. But if you do your history, and I know you're a student of history, Brother Carl is, if you look at World War I, if you really get into the crux of it, and you get back into the Slavic, you go back to Africa, Ancient Africa, Ethiopia, they were fighting wars based on race. And when you look at it, it's funny, because all of the Eastern European countries that are in Christianity, most of them have a black Madonna. And it's weird how Hitler could say that he hated black people and that, something like that, but yet they were in these churches praying to a black Madonna since like the 4th century or something like that. So this is a long before America, before England was a nation. So when you get into the roots of it, like you say, genetic annihilation, but the representation for me as a black person in my consciousness is that Mary represents...
Hang on a second, Brother Donnie, because we got to take a break, and I'll let you finish up and so she can respond on the other side. Folks, you too can join the conversation with Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls in about 2.5.
This podcast was recorded by BKRpodcast.com.
And then you were staying with us, I guess, Dr. Francis Joyce Welsing, and of course you can reach her at 800-450-7876, or get us on Facebook at carlnelsonshow.com. Got some Facebook questions as well. So, folks, you can also like us on Facebook at carlnelsonshow.com. Brother Donnie, can you wrap it up real quick, because a bunch of folks want to talk to Dr. Welsing.
Oh, yeah. And Dr. Welsing, I just thank you for your analysis, because if you really go back through history, and if you get to the crux of it all, when you look at research all religion, if you look at the Christian religion, if you look at the Black Madonna, what it symbolizes to me as a black person is the black family, the black woman and child. That's inexcusable. I mean, people could say religion this, religion that, but you ask yourself, why? How could this man be so racist, but yet these people were praying to a Black Madonna? And it goes back to genetics and the feeling of like superiority, and that's probably where the hate stems from. You know, because they.
All right. Well, let's give her a chance to respond, Brother Donnie.
All right.
Thanks for your call.
Well, I would again just tie that in the Black Madonna. Black people were the first human beings on the planet, and we're the mothers and fathers of everybody on this planet. And that basically hidden image of the Black Madonna and child comes from that going all the way back into ancient Egypt. And so history is very important. If I could wave a magic wand, black people would become the most serious, disciplined, studying, self-respecting people that the planet has ever seen. Because we need to study history. And as we say that, I'm just thinking about Jonestown, where 1,000 black people were murdered in Jonestown following what they thought Jim Jones, a white man, was going to be their savior. And a sign laying on top of those bodies came from the philosopher George Santayana that said, "Those who do not learn from history will repeat history. Those who do not learn from history will repeat history." So we as black people, I say self-respect is more powerful than a nuclear weapon. And self-respect is being snatched away from us in this system of racism, white supremacy. And so little else needs to be done before we are a gone people. But I believe it's not too late for us to wake up and get a hold of ourselves and understand who we are supposed to be on this planet, and also get as serious about what is happening to black people here as to what is also happening in the mass killing and murders that are taking place on the continent of Africa of black people.
Dr. Wilson and Brother Donnie, thanks for your question, because it leads to a Facebook question that we got. A person says, Carl, please ask Dr. Welsing, what is the greater detriment to black people, white supremacy or the acceptance and belief in Christianity via the Bible?
I would say it's all a part of the same thing. The system of racism, white supremacy, Neely Fuller, who helped us understand we're dealing with a total system structure, says that the system covers economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. So all of the areas of people activity are incorporated into the system. So it's not just economics. It's economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. So the symbolism and the images that are supposed to be religion support the system concept of racism, white supremacy. Because I say that if Jesus, and if we look at that name in Ebonics, it says just us. But it's the image. I'd say that until proven otherwise, if there was a historic Jesus, he was a black man. In that part of the world, he was a black man. But we are being reintroduced every couple of years with new pictures of Jesus as a white man and as a European, and all of the people that were surrounding him as white. And this is so that black people and other people of color who are victims of the system of racism, white supremacy, will continue to worship white, wish they were white, want to be white, believe white, hate black. So we have to, there's a lot of mind work that we need to be involved in, but all of it is related.
All right, 800-450-7876, line 5 is Philip in Chicago. Philip, you have a question for Dr. Welsing?
Thanks, Carl. That really kind of ties in with what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, are you asking us to come out of the black church? Because I believe we're praying to the wrong God. And you talked about a minute ago about the historical aspect of us being the first, as far as Africa, going back to that era or that age. Are you really, why aren't you asking us to just come out of the black church? And how much of our problem is really spiritual, as far as tying into the problem with the system, as you call it?
Well, it's like at a certain level I could say I'm a product of the black church. I was christened Baptist under the water and christened, baptized under the water in the Baptist church and christened AME. But it's a point of understanding the system of racism, white supremacy. It's not a matter of come out of the black church. It's a matter of understanding the total system construct of racism, white supremacy. And we could look at the continent of Africa. They haven't solved the problem of racism, white supremacy. This is a new entity that has to be understood. So on the very continent itself, the people there are in the same situation that we are in here and wherever we are in the diaspora, that we have not solved the problem of racism, white supremacy. I was talking to a person from Africa recently, and they were saying to me, Dr. Welsing, on the continent in West Africa, the important thing is that every black man should have a white woman. So it's white supremacy brainwashing that is impacting the lives of black people everywhere. And so we need to be determined to solve the problem of racism, white supremacy in all of its aspects.
Well, is the American, instead of the black church, is the American Christian church playing a part in the system, as you call it?
Wait a minute, repeat that. I didn't hear the first part.
The American church, or the Christian church, is it part and parcel? Is it hand in hand with the system of racism, white supremacy?
Right. That's where we learned about so-called Christianity doing formal slavery, where we were given the image of who was supposed to be God was the same image of the slave master. And that was who we were propagandized and told that this is going to be our Savior. Not us saving ourselves and understanding white supremacy. No, that this white image was the Savior. And I tell people all the time, we have to look deeply into the conditioning that has taken place in this system. I said, if I invented 3 pills, the first pill would turn you white by tomorrow morning, the second pill would give you long straight hair, the third pill will give you so-called white features. And I went on eBay, I'd be richer than Oprah by Wednesday. See, this is how deep the conditioning is. And it's not just black people, it's people on the subcontinent of India who want to bleach their skin and become white. People in Asia, all over the non-white world, where people who classify themselves as white have gone and dominated. All of those people are into self-hatred because of their pigmentation. And if given their druthers would want to be white. And because sometimes people who are white have asked me, well, if we're supposed to be 1/10 of the people on the planet, how is it that we're able to control the 9/10? And I said, well, one answer is that you could be genetically superior. in terms of intelligence. But I don't believe that. I do think that once the 1/10 figured out the situation that they were in, and they decided that they were going to dominate the 9/10 and then program the 9/10 to hate themselves and to admire the 1/10. And so even though the 9/10 are a numerical majority, they have cut their majority status or diminished it by wanting to be white.
All right, hold that thought right there, Doctor. We've got to take a break. Philip, thanks for your call. 800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. Welsing. We'll take your phone calls in about.
This podcast was recorded by BKRPodcast.com.
With us and our guest, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. The number to call, speak to her, 800-450-7876. Let's go to Simona. Simona's in Northern Virginia. Simona, you have a question for Dr. Welsing.
Yes. Hello, Dr. Wilson. It is really an honor and a pleasure to speak with you this evening. The first time I ever heard you speak was on the Carl Nelson show, and I'm so grateful to him for that. I was one of those haters of this scandal thing that has come about, personally because I served in the military. And when I travel overseas in Europe and Asia, and even when I did my service in Antarctica, I was always treated the same way. The locals always had a fascination, especially the men had a fascination with black women. It wasn't that they found us desirable. It was more so they wanted to experience a fantasy. And I actually have experienced some of these things that are happening now in the news. When I worked in the military and when I came out and worked civil service, there are things that black women have to do, such as this Kerry Washington in Scandal's role, in order for us to make it up the corporate ladder. And one thing my father told me as a child when I grew up, he told me, he said, Simona, when you climb the ladder of success, don't let the boys look up your dress. And I never understood what he meant about, what he was actually saying until my adult life when I joined the military. I literally witnessed there were unforeseen things that have gone on in the military with the senior officials where you have to do in order for you to get promoted as a black female. And so there was a lot of resentment because I found that the black men that were around me did not take up for me, or they were trying to be a part of that and wanted me to do the same thing. So because I refuted and because I stood my ground, because I respected myself, as you were saying before, it's all about respect, I paid a tremendous price.
I'm sure so.
I really did, because I went from making 6 figures to food stamps. I will tell you that much. Now, but what I want to know, and if you could just please explain to me, is it too late for our black men? Do black men just go, there are some black men that are happily married to black women and they're happy. But the extremist men that are left over from outside of the prison camp and outside of any other socio-economical degradation that is going on with the black men, those, do they not desire black women? Is the era for black women over? Prime example, on the front cover of this issue of Vogue magazine, I had a girlfriend, she about had a heart attack and called me in the store, and she was basically saying, the front cover magazine basically says something to the effect, this is the new Hollywood. This is the new Hollywood. And it had Idris Elba, the actor from 12 Years a Slave, and then there were 2 other actors on the front cover. It was a fold-out, but on the front cover, they had the woman, the actor from Pretty Woman, I forget the redhead's name. She was sitting on Idris Elba's lap. And so someone that is not conscious is going to be like, oh, that is so cute, like, she was so cute sitting on his lap. But it repeated again in the fold-out. And they have the black actress who won her awards, but she's standing idle by herself. just black as day, black and beautiful by herself. So I want to pose this question to you as a sister. And it is my agenda to come see you in D.C., where most of my mishaps have happened. But I want to know, is it too late? You know, why don't black men desire? I went to Germany. I had an elderly German woman. She couldn't speak English. She turned me around in front of the store, downtown Frankfurt, and she felt my butt. And I asked my friends, why did she do that? And they said, because she thinks you are a monkey. Hitler explained to them in their era that we had monkey tails curled up in our pants. That's why our butts were so big. So she was groping me to grasp a monkey tail. And then on the other hand, the German women were stalking me. German men were stalking me. And the black men, of course, were engaged with the German women. So I just want to ask that question. If you could, and I will take it offline. And thank you so much, Dr. Welsing, for doing what you do. I love you so much. Thank you. You, Dr. Quasey, and the rest of the gang. I aspire to be like you real soon in the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And what you are saying is very, very interesting. See, I maintain that, in other words, the war of racism, white supremacy, is being conducted against us as black people and other people of color, but we have to take responsibility for what is happening to ourselves. And let our level of self-respect say, we will never give up. And so if we begin, and I see the creator of the universe, whoever made this magnificent universe and its people, made black people the mothers and fathers of everybody on the planet. And to the extent that black people end up hating themselves, then the creative force in the universe is going to say, suffer. I made you black because of what black actually is and what it represents. And so if you're going to hate it and you want to be everything other than black, then you are going to suffer. But if you begin to admire and understand how I made you and the importance of black and the importance of being you, then I will lend my help to you. So I'm not going to give up. I don't think that black people should give up. And black men and black women need to understand, if they are going to respect themselves, then black men have to respect black women, and black women have to respect black men. And even though that numbers, the percentage of people who at this point in time are feeling that way, that percentage may be small, but if that percentage does everything in its power, then I do believe that other people will begin to wake up. And all you need is a critical mass to be able to impose change. And so if there can be a critical mass of black men and women who understand black is beautiful, black pride, black dignity, and the most powerful things in the universe, they give the title black. Black holds, black energy, black matter. And the people who are supposed to know about God, they put them in black clothes. The people who are supposed to have knowledge, they put them in black. The people who are supposed to know about justice in the courts have black robes on. So we need to appreciate and understand what black is, what it is supposed to be, and try to become a manifestation of that, and to never give up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simone. Thanks for your call. 800-450-7876. Go to line 1. Yao in D.C. Yao, you're on with Dr. Welsing. You have a question for her.
Yeah, I was calling. Thanks for all your work over the years. I had seen on one website they were talking about the registration, census taking an ancestry of the Europeans they call Germans over in Germany before the Holocaust. Do you think that's going to happen here? I'll take the answer offline. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Carl, repeat that question for me.
And you're talking about something with the census?
Yeah, see, they did registration, like voter registration, then census, and then they traced the ancestry of the people before they killed them off over in Germany.
I see. In other words, Hitler, for example, wanted to know who people's parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were to establish their racial lineage. Well, you see, in other words, you can look at black people here and understand what their racial lineage is. And I just say that when a people are fearful of being genetically annihilated by another people, or another people has the potential to cause their genetic annihilation, the logical endpoint is to subject those people to genocide. And so when we see black men being encouraged to be gay or homosexual, or the attempt on the part of people who classify themselves as white to impose homosexuality on the continent of Africa, that's just pushing people into a genocide mode. And we need to understand this. It's not a matter of being against somebody who may say they're gay. You see, but when somebody tries, they will not impose education. They will not.
Hold that thought right there, Doctor. We've got to take a quick break. I'll let you finish up on the other side. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by BKRPodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us, and our guest, Dr. Francis Chris Welsing. And Dr. Welsing, I'm going to let you finish up on the homosexual agenda before we take another call.
Well, you see, I think it's fascinating to look at people who classify themselves as white attempting to promote that black people put homosexuality on the same plane as heterosexuality as behavior conduct, where, you know, they don't want to impose education, they don't want to impose employment, they don't want to impose decent housing, they don't want to impose health care. So why would you get all agitated and excited about imposing homosexuality on a particular group of people? And I say that that is an aspect, conscious and or subconscious, of the genocide necessity, white genociding black people. And so we need to understand that. And this is why it's important for black people to be able to articulate an understanding of racism, white supremacy, so that they can clarify to people who classify themselves as white, this may be your survival necessity, but this cannot be values for black people, the first human beings on the planet, the people who intend to project their generations into the next billion years, that we cannot be on that course. That may be the course that you think is necessary for yourself, but you cannot dictate that this should be our course, because you're not dictating the things that would be constructive for black people or making those conditions prevail.
All right, 800-450-7876. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line 6 in Houston. Chris is waiting for us. Chris, you have a question for Dr. Welsing. Is Chris there? All right. Let's go to line 5 then. Let's pick up Tyrone in D.C. Tyrone?
Good evening to you and to Dr. Welsing.
Good evening.
I have a question pertaining to homosexuality. And, I mean, I realize that there are, this is not, certainly, I would say everybody is not, how would I say, coming in the world that way. But isn't there a certain percentage, or maybe a small percentage of people, Dr. Welsing, who are born that way? Or is there any, I've been reading things where there are some people, or at least they believe that there's some people who have this, where this is biological. And I was wondering, have you read any reports like that? What is your opinion on the biological aspects of this? And and I will take my call or take my answer off there. Thank you for taking my call.
Okay, I would say that the field of medicine is not certain and doesn't really have full explanation as to why we see what we might refer to as homosexuality, and this is why I'm not speaking against the person who may identify themselves as being homosexual, because we don't have all of the answers in as to what really produces this condition. But I'm simply saying that when a group of people seek to impose this on black people, or seek to impose this on countries in Africa, then one has to understand, well, wait a minute. Why are you prioritizing this, but you do not prioritize health, housing, infrastructure, education? Why is it important to you to impose this on this particular group of people? Or why is it important for people who classify themselves as white to impose this on black people? Do you see? And if black people have been complaining about various aspects of racism, white supremacy, behavior that is conducted by white people towards black people, and people who classify themselves as white haven't stopped this hurtful behavior. So one can conclude maybe this is a part of your package of behaviors that are destructive to us. And so if we think about it and conclude that this is not constructive for us, do not seek to impose your values on us. And this is not to be against people who say that they may be homosexual or gay. They should be treated with respect, of course. But don't say you have to accept this. You have to put this on the same level. Marriage of a male and a male and a female on the same level. And teach this to your children, that this is the same as a heterosexual relationship. The homosexual relationship is not productive of children. And so for people who are interested in projecting their generations thousands of years into the future cannot endorse this mode. They can seek to understand it further. And maybe it is something that if, for example, if some forms of male homosexuality occur because there has been the absence of fathers, then the answer is to make certain that families have the presence of fathers, or that they have the conditions where men are employed so they can play the role of husband and father.
800-450-7876. Go to line 1. Jay in L.A. Jay, can you make it quick for us? A question for Dr. Welsing.
Yeah, I can make it real quick. First, I'd like to commend Dr. Welsing for over the years of her work in the field. And I'd like to commend her as she always held the relationship between the black man and the black woman when people do call in. For the sister who did call in, out of all her examples, she never used that example as where she might have seen women out there doing things in bad behavior. And I think that's one of the major problems between the two. I'd like for you to have a show call where you have Dr. France to spend 3 hours on nothing but relationships between black males and black females. And so that's all I wanted to do, is commend her, because when people do call in like that, she never falls into the trap. She always puts the responsibility on both parties, and I love her for that. Thank you for all your service, Dr. West.
Thank you for your comment. And let me just say this: if a system can control whether men have jobs and whether they can have viable employment and continuous employment, that system can control the relationship between a man and a woman. You see, in other words, a man being a husband and being a father are not just words, those are functions. And there are conditions that go into supporting whether that function can be carried out. And if you have massive chronic unemployment of men, then you are influencing the nature of the relationship between the black man and the black woman, let us say. And to go back to the scandal situation, I think that black women may subconsciously find themselves attracted to that because women are attracted to power. Women are attracted to male power because that means protection. And so if power is being denied by the system of racism, white supremacy to black men, then the women, they find themselves fantasizing and looking at scandal because they want to see a man that has authority and a man that has power, because power is denied to us as black men and black women in the system of racism, white supremacy.
Okay, let's see if Kale on line 3 can do it real quick first. Kale?
Hey, thank you so much, Brother Carl Nelson, the world's greatest talk show host, world's greatest talk show, and the world's greatest doctor for the mind and the spirit, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Thank you. I got I keep focusing on appetite. My thing is appetite. I look at the 800-pound person on TV, and they never tell us why this person can't stop eating, but I'm believing on my own that we have these appetites for certain sensations. In his case, or that person's case, the sensation of a taste. They never get enough.
Yeah. Kale, can you put in a question on real quick because we got like a minute?
Bottom line is, I would like to see the doctor and other experts get our people to focus on our appetites and how we ended up with the appetites that we do have and how those appetites have been manipulated. Because we didn't never grow up eating sushi, but you got blacks that love sushi and they love this other place we talk about today. Thank you.
Well, let me just say briefly that if black people live under 24/7 stress from the system of racism, the stressors in economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And so people subconsciously can focus on what gives them comfort. And food is the first thing that we experience as comfort. I mean, when you're born and you're nursed by your mother or you're being fed by your mother. So food and nutrition and nourishment is what people can begin to fall back on subconsciously if they need comforting. But it's a matter of being made consciously aware that this is dynamically what is happening. It doesn't mean you're crazy.
I hate to cut you up, but we're just out of time. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll have to talk again, Carl.
We'll do it real soon. Thank you very much.
All right.
That's Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Hey, as I mentioned, we're out of time. Stay strong, stay positive. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock right here on 1450.